RGB fans on your graphics card. Have Gigabyte started a new trend, or is it a complete miss? Well, overall, I think most of us can agree that it looks pretty good if you want an over-the-top looking card. So today we're going to dive into the RTX 2080 Ti Aorus Extreme and take a look at thermals, power consumption and limits, overclocking, and of course the lighting. Now, we're not going to be covering performance numbers or benchmarks for this card today because we've already reviewed the 2080 Ti, and to be honest, most of them just perform the same within about 2% of each other. So if you want to see what the 2080 Ti can do at 1440p and 4K, you can watch my benchmark video in the top right hand corner. For the Aorus Extreme though, let's start with the lighting because I'm pretty sure that's why most of you clicked this video in the first place. And honestly, I think we'll see RGB fans make their way onto more graphics cards now that Gigabyte have taken the first step here. So my feelings towards the looks and design of this card are overall really positive, and the reason for that is because it achieves that gamer aesthetic without looking cheap and immature, in my opinion. For the RGB lighting, there's a single addressable RGB LED on one of the fan blades on each of the three fans, and I do have to mention that the lighting is a lot smoother and continuous in real life compared to how choppy it looks on camera. If I reduce the shutter speed on my camera to 1/30th of a second, it definitely looks a lot closer to how it actually looks, but it still looks much smoother in person. The faster the fan spins, the smoother the lighting looks as well, but at full load with a fan speed of around 2000 RPM, the lighting does look quite good. As I said, they are addressable RGB LEDs, which you can fully customize in Gigabyte's RGB Fusion software. There's also lighting on the Aorus logo at the front of the card and on the backplate as well. So in terms of RGB lighting on a graphics card, this has to be one of my personal favorites. There's also two 8-pin power connectors, which is pretty standard for 2080 Ti's, and thankfully these are offset into the PCB to improve compatibility when it comes to the graphics card height. It seems that Gigabyte have solely focused on aesthetics here though, and drawing gamers in with that unique design, as cooling performance and thermals are average at best for an almost 3-slot card. We'll get to those numbers in just a minute, but first let's take a quick look at the cooling design. On the surface we can see three 100mm fans. Usually we'd see 80 to 90mm fans here with enough spacing between them, but here Gigabyte decided to make them larger, cut a significant portion out of the middle fan, and then overlap all three. Now this is not an innovation in cooling, and I think this design decision was made solely on the fact that larger RGB fans look better than smaller ones, and also overlapping them does create a nice visual effect. Unfortunately, this means that the middle fan is extremely cut down though, and the fan blades are basically just small plastic spokes at this point and probably don't contribute a whole lot to additional airflow. The cooler can be removed pretty easily just by removing all of the screws on the backplate, and there we can reveal 7 copper heat pipes that are in direct contact with the GPU die. And as usual, there's a cold plate attached to the heatsink, and this makes direct contact with the VRM and memory modules via some thermal pads. Out of the box, the GPU was boosting to 1900 MHz, although it was deviating quite a bit, and this is an indication of a power limit at stock. Just by raising the power limit to 122%, I was able to achieve a stable boost clock of 1935 MHz, and for a final overclock, I was able to add 70 MHz to the GPU and 700 MHz to the memory. Now, Gigabyte advertises the 2080 Ti Extreme as a 16-phase V-Core VRM, however, it uses the UP9512 8-phase PWM controller. There's definitely 16 paired power stages and capacitors that I can see here, but I can't see any doublers on the board, so it's likely that it is just 8 PWM phases for the V-Core VRM. The MOSFETs being used are the FDM-F3170s, which are 70 amp power stages. These are the same power stages used on the 2080 Ti Founders Edition from Nvidia. In regards to operating thermals, the results here are kind of disappointing given that this is Gigabyte's flagship model, which usually offers the best cooling, but I found it to actually run a decent bit warmer than their mid-tier 2080 Ti, the Gaming OC. Of course, power limits and clock speeds are a little different between these two, but we're talking about a 10-degree warmer result here for a much larger card. If I had anything to blame, I'd say it's probably those fans or a lack of a middle fan, whereas the Gaming OC has three 82mm fans which aren't overlapping each other or missing half of the fan blades. The Aorus Extreme really just has two 100mm fans that are providing actual airflow. The VRM MOSFETs and the memory modules run a bit warmer as a result too, since they're cooled by the same fans and heatsink. Not alarming temperatures to be honest, but keep in mind this was on an open test bench. You'll see much warmer results in most closed cases. Especially if you're overclocking this card, you'll want to make sure you're running some good fans in your case to keep it cool enough. And here's a quick look at power consumption, and the main point I want to show here is that you can raise the power limit of this card quite a bit from its stock out of the box configuration. With an overclock, you're looking at a little over 300 watts for a typical gaming load. So closing thoughts on this card are a bit mixed, and I'm honestly not sure if I can recommend it over say the Asus Strix or EVGA's XT Ultra or MSI's Gaming X Trio. I mean, if you're just after those RGB fans and a cool design and you're okay with average thermal performance, then I guess it's an okay choice. One thing's for sure, I think the card looks pretty outstanding if you are building a lit system. As always though guys, I'm very interested to see what you guys think of this graphics card and whether you're attracted to that gamer design or if you like something a little bit more simple. Let me know your thoughts down below. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching. Subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.